Okay, welcome everybody. So we had a question through this week for the Q&A. The question has a reference to the Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 12, verse 13 in the commentary. It states, "A devotee's attachment to the Supreme frees him from all worldly attachment." The question, the devotee is said to be free from attachment and also attached to the Supreme. Please explain. Okay, so let's start by looking at what we mean by this word attachment. In general, we can think of it as an emotional or mental dependency on something. We are depending on something outside of ourselves for a sense of stability. And of course, the image here we have on the right hand side is of a tree that has been replanted, and in order to keep it stable, we put stakes in the ground and we attach the trunk to the stakes so that when the wind blows, it can stay standing. It's stable. When we are attached to something, we're devoted to it. So the reason that we're devoted to it is because we, in a sense, get something back from that devotion. We get that sense of stability, well-being, mental peace. To say that we're devoted to the object of our attachment means that we place it on a pedestal. It shapes our worldview because we consider that to be one of the higher goods in our life, and it becomes the focal point of our choices. We make choices biased towards the object of our attachment. So we can be attached to anything. And we'll see a list here. It's not exhaustive, of course, but it represents the different levels of our personality. At the material level, we can be attached to our money, to our possessions. The thought that our money or our possessions are taken away from us fills us with a sense of anxiety. We can be related at the physical level, to our health, to skill or prowess, to our strength, to our beauty, and to the senses, the perceptions that the senses can deliver us. At the emotional level, we are attached to people in our lives, to the groups that we belong to. At the intellectual level, we become attached to knowledge or ideologies. At the moral level of our personality, we can become attached to our system of ethics and morals. And finally, we have attachment to the Supreme, which is what he's talking about here. The Supreme refers to the self within, and we'll get to that as we go through. So the question is attachment bad? The notion of attachment being bad or not depends on our perspective. So what's an example to illustrate this idea? A child's attachment is initially to her parents, to her family unit. Then as she grows into an older child, then a young adult, teenager, the attachment shifts from the parents to the peers. She's less attached to her parents, more attached to her peer group, you could say. Now this is a natural, healthy growth. So this highlights a really important point, that in order to detach from anything, we must attach to something higher. So the question, of course, is, well, why do we want to detach from anything? For the simple reason that our attachment keeps us bound. Go back to the image of the tree. While it may provide some stability, the tree is bound to that stake. Now, for a tree, it's not a problem. All a tree needs to do is stand there and grow. But for human beings, we're different, of course. We are attached to, let us say, our money. What that means is that any movements that we make that threatens that attachment become difficult for us. We're constrained in our thinking, we're constrained in our worldview, and we are limited in our actions. If we are attached to a person, then when that person spurns us, our emotional state suffers. So we're handing the reins of control of our emotional state to something outside of ourselves. This is the context in which we say attachment is bad. It's a constraint on our ability to live freely. So growth then means increased self-sufficiency. If we go back to our definition of attachment as depending on something outside of ourselves for stability, then growth means that we no longer depend on things outside of ourselves for that stability. Go back to the example of the child. She's less dependent on the parental relationship for her own sense of identity, for a sense of stability in the world. She's now depending more on her friend group, her peer group. So, is attachment bad? In the sense that it limits and constrains us, yes. But attachment to the higher is a necessary part of detaching from the lower and gaining greater self-sufficiency. And so when we talk about lower and higher, we're talking about these different aspects of the personality. The lower refers to those areas of the personality or those areas of the world that have a limited capacity to bring us a genuine sense of freedom and well-being. The higher, more realistically, deliver a genuine sense of freedom. So from the material, we climb our way up to the physical and sensory, to the emotional, intellectual, moral, and then finally the spiritual. Okay, so how does this relate to the question? A devotee's attachment to the Supreme frees him from all worldly attachment. So the devotee is said to be free from attachment and also attached to the Supreme. Please explain. So let's look at this idea of being free from attachment. From the relative perspective, being free from attachment means that you're free from attachment to the lower aspects. So an adult is completely free from childhood attachments. As a child, you were attached to the sort of toys and playthings that were of concern to you. You were dependent on those areas of the world for a sense of well-being, stability. An adult has no dependency on toys. He's completely free from those attachments. But, of course, he is now attached to business, money-making, social engagements, family, legacy, etc. So he's also constrained and bound by those attachments. So to be free from attachment from a relative perspective means that you're free from the lower and now you're clutching onto the higher. From the absolute perspective, free from attachment means no dependency on anything in the world. Everything in those lower 5 levels of the cone. So this is the devotee. A devotee has no attachment to the material, physical, emotional, intellectual or moral side of life. They still use those areas of life. The devotee still makes money, takes care of their physical health, has loving relationships, seeks out higher knowledge, lives an ethical, moral lifestyle. They still engage with and use those areas of life, but they're no longer attached to them. This is what is meant by free from attachment in the context here. Devotee is free from attachment means the devotee is free from worldly attachment. How is this freedom from everything in the world achieved? Well, by attaching to the Supreme. By attaching to something outside the world. That's the top part of the cone, the spiritual aspect. So the devotee is devoted now to knowing their essential self, their true identity. When that is their primary focus in life, when that's the thing they place highest on the pedestal, that determines their worldview, that determines their choices. They act in the world, but there's no attachment to it because their attachment is to something outside the world. When we say outside the world, we can think of it most easily as being not influenced, determined, or defined by anything in the world. It's your essential self. So let's contrast this idea of an essential self or a true self with the ego. different areas of the world, different areas of life, they constrain or they define those identities within you. You have a material identity. You have a physical identity. So your physical identity, of course, is defined by your body. Your emotional identity is defined by the emotional body that you have. The sort of emotions you have, whether you are highly emotional or not very emotional. Your intellectual identity is defined by the stuff you know. Your moral identity is defined by your moral compass. So all of these identities are defined or constrained by these different material aspects, these different roles. And this is the ego. The ego is the character that you're playing, which, in a different set of circumstances, with a different set of life experiences, would be different. If you had grown up with one parent instead of two, you might have had a different emotional profile to the one you have now. If you'd done a trade instead of going to university, you'd have a different intellectual identity. If you had been exposed to higher values demonstrated by those in your community, moral leaders, you'd have a different moral identity. So these roles, these identities can change, but the question is, who am I outside of all of these roles? Who is the one playing these roles? Who is unaffected and unchanged by whatever the identity happens to be? That is the self. The devotee is devoted to finding that essential self. That is the highest rung of the ladder. And when they are attached to that, they have detached from everything below it. There's no worldly attachment whatsoever. So that's the devotee who is striving in practice. You can take that one level further and say the devotee is also now the one who has achieved that goal. And from that perspective, that will be a bit like a distinction that we can make between a dreamer and a waker. The dreamer is the one who is striving in the dream for whatever they want, whether it's material or spiritual knowledge. But the one who wakes up is completely free from anything in the dream. So too, the word devotee here can refer to the one who is striving to know that essential self. In another context, the word devotee can mean the one who has achieved that knowledge. They are truly free. They've truly woken up from all of the identities and roles that they're playing. But even before that, if your primary focus is to seek your essential self, then all of your worldly attachments will fade into insignificance. They won't define you. They won't constrain you. You'll engage with those areas of the world, but be free from attachment to them.